Bonjour, bonjour, mes amis. It is delightful to be here with you this evening, and also exceptionally delightful to be here with you this evening, Dr. Varden. How are you?
I am doing quite well. So
Yay!
nice to be back again.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been such a long time.
I know. It feels like a long beat, and thankfully it was a short beat. So for the audience that's a little bit confused by this, Dr. Varden and I did a webinar yesterday together, and it was absolutely delightful. And we're excited to tuck into today's. And I would imagine today's is extra close to your heart as someone who is both a mama and a grandmama.
Yes, and actually, a grandmama already with two little ones, but my daughter is
Mm.
37 weeks pregnant. She is just about to pop, which is
Oh,
wonderful with my
that must be.
grandbabies. So
Oh, and her
excited.
first, right?
Her first, yes, because the other two are from my son.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
so
exciting.
this is very close to my heart and is in conversations that I have had with
Yeah.
both my daughter and my daughter-in-law, as they
Amazing.
have been moving through their pregnancy.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope this evening, as you have conversations with
Mhm.
your children, and I'm sure with other people's children through your clinical practice, we can start to dispel some of the myths, and let's be plain, the fear mongering that can happen
Mhm.
when
Right.
someone is pregnant. You get so excited and you care so much for the life that was within or can become within that, you're scared to even, think a bad thought or make the wrong move because it
Mhm.
feels like the consequences of that will be so incredible. So, audience, tonight, what we're hoping to do is explore MTHFR, explore what impact that has both on your supplement selection before and during pregnancy, and really support you with some science grounded information, some clinic based information. Audience, we want to make sure that we're also speaking to what you want to know this evening. So please, in the chat, we are focusing our conversation today on methylation, on MTHFR, on supplementation, but please let us know what myths you've heard around all of this. Um, and audience, please put those into the chat because we'd love to make sure that we're addressing those this evening. Dr. Varden, have you heard any funny myths that have to do with pregnancy and methylation or folate and all that other fun stuff?
Hmm. Honestly, not so much with methylation specifically,
Mm-hmm.
but even things, that my daughter has been like,
Yeah.
Mom, if I ate, this food and, heartburn or all this other stuff,
Yeah.
did I hurt my baby? Is he going to be okay? Is it, is it going to make me go into labor early?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of things like that. It's almost the worries get exemplified and the concerns definitely
Yeah.
multiplied
Yeah.
with pregnant, and especially getting so close.
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to move into the survey audience so that we know what you're here to see. But Marin has already tickled my heart. And the critter that is on screen with me, my little fur baby, this is Nepeta. And for those that are plant nerds out there, Nepeta is Latin for catnip. And she owns that. Catnip is a psychedelic for cats, and she's crazy. So I guess I psychically knew what I was getting when I named her.
Love it.
All right, so Fanny or Katie, if one of you could toss up the survey. Oh, we're so close, I believe.
There we go.
She's trying to talk to the audience. I don't know if you can hear the purring. All right, there we go. So, audience, Dr. Varden and I show up to the end of supporting your learning. So, we have a lot that we want to share, but we want to make sure we're catching what you are hoping to know. Um, so we asked the first question is, do you know your MTHFR? What is your current understanding? And a beautiful majority of the audience here, 64%, has been tested and knows their variant. So audience, if you know your variant, please have it close by. Partway through the webinar, Dr. Varden is going to talk through not only that variant, but a few others that are really important to understanding your MTHFR. Because what we're eventually gonna tease out, spoiler alert, it's not just about MTHFR. There's a few other genes that play into it. So if you have your 360 panel, pull out your methylation results. If you've done your testing with someone else, pull out your MTHFR results, and we're going to walk through it all together. The next question we asked here is, are you taking any folate or prenatal? And 60% of the audience is saying yes, they're taking a prenatal with the methylated form. So that's methyl B9. Um, and then 32% of the audience is saying no, they are not. So of the 32% that is not, audience, I'd love to know, um, if the 32% who is not, is there plans to get pregnant? Because if there's no plans to get pregnant, it makes sense that you're not on the prenatal. But we'll make the case this evening. If you're thinking about it, you should be on one. The last question that we have here is, what would you most like to learn from this webinar? And let's see, 36% the biggest number return here is practical steps to support methylation in pregnancy, which I think in particular, once we go through the different forms of folate, Dr. Varden goes through the genes, you'll get some clarity on that. Another 30% of the audience is hoping to understand their MTHFR result, which beautifully we will be getting to. And the last question here, what are you most concerned about when it comes to pregnancy and methylation? They're not sure yet. I value that honesty of those that answered, though, birth defects and choosing the right supplement. So again, we'll get to that. So thank you, audience, for your honesty there. And I hope that we're able to navigate some of these questions. And I see Terry is calling in as a future grandmother. So someone that is supporting someone who is pregnant and bringing new life into the world. So, Dr. Varden, before we get into MTHFR, MTHFR and supplements are really important or popular because of a specific B as in Bob, vitamin. So, do you want to talk to our audience a little bit about folate, which is the B vitamin we're going to be talking about, B9? Do you want to talk to our audience about why folate is really important to preconception, conception, and then bringing about baby within womb?
Absolutely. So the B vitamin that Dr. Kosterman is talking about is B9. And folate, it's such a beautiful thing because the word actually comes from foliage. So
Yeah.
the greens, and that's why there are a lot of those B vitamins, especially folate B9, in dark leafy greens, in foliage. And we can also find it in animals that eat foliage. So we can actually get it from animal products as well. So, what's the big deal, about the methylation cycle, the MTHFR, and what does this do in relation to folate? Because when we're talking about MTHFR, that is a methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Big mouth word that methyl tetrahydrofolate. There's that B9 that what it does in reductase. So it's an enzyme that helps to work and that deals with folate itself. So when we're talking about the methylation cycle, the importance of that is how our body makes these methyl groups. Methyl groups, they're made up of a carbon, 3 hydrogens, really important for so many processes. And there are a lot of biochemical processes that deal with, or that methylation works on. Detoxification, which we dove into last night, neurotransmitter conversion, DNA synthesis, which is super important when it comes to our own cell splitting, but also in meiosis, in the little babies, growing, that those cells are splitting so rapidly, and in each cell there's a new string of DNA. And folate, B9, and even B12 play a part in that DNA synthesis. So when we're looking at MTHFR and in pregnancy and B9, pregnancy is that time when there is a need for increased folate, because these methyl
Mm-hmm.
groups are needed for the nucleotide synthesis for the developing
Yeah.
baby, which I just explained.
Yeah.
And when we're saying about B9, well, there are many things that it can do and where to get it.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to do is toss the ball over to you,
Mm-hmm.
Kosterman,
Yeah.
to work off of some support on B9 and
Yeah.
for women in fertility and during pregnancy.
Yeah, yeah. So audience, it's one of the hallmark nutrients that if you go to any doctor out there and you're like, I'm thinking about getting pregnant, they're like, let's get you on a prenatal. And the reason they want you on a prenatal is really to ensure that you're getting enough of the folate. Why is folate so important? So Dr. Varden talked about from a biochemical perspective, it facilitates methylation. So what does methylation do for you and baby? Okay. Um, when you first conceive, as Dr. Varden said, you're going to be replicating a lot of cells. You're going to get two happy little a sperm and an egg that come together. Their DNA is going to dance a little bit, and that's the original copy. And the gestation period, you carrying baby is to an extent copying and pasting from that, right? So we go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 and upwards and onwards, right? And all that happy progression there. And we want to know that that replication is sound. So first and foremost, the methylation, folate specifically, will help with that replication. And if you have a mistake in those in those first few days, in those first few replications, that can be a source of miscarriage and pregnancy not carrying through beyond those first few days because of poor replication there. Okay. And if you get further past and there's still insufficient folate, what we do see is neural tube defects. Neural tubes meaning the first inklings of a nervous system, the first inklings of brain and how brain connects to body. There's not sufficient support there to develop that. And so baby can create like a spina bifida or I cannot pronounce this, but effectively the skull not fusing properly, ancephaly. Audience, I
And
can't. Thank you. If it's more than 2 syllables, audience, I'm not getting there. But poorly fused skulls. So this is why it's so important. While it's very important during pregnancy, we talk about prenatals, meaning before conception, because we want to have that sufficient amount. A lot of everything I've talked about, that DNA replication, how the spinal cord, et cetera, is going to be forming and fusing, that all happens in the first 28 days, oftentimes before the person even knows they're pregnant. So this is why we care about it, right? It's really integral to the growth of baby, that replication of DNA throughout the entire 8.5 months, but especially in those first 28 days, those first copy and pastes of DNA. All right. So, audience, let's talk through the different forms of folate. Because if you go to a doctor, the doctor is categorically going to say you should be on B9. And then the doctor might, or you might go to the doctor, what form of B9? And so we want to talk you through the different forms. So, Dr. Varden, do you want to talk the audience through the 3 different forms that B9 can show up in supplement form?
Okay, so, well, as far as forms of folate, so we have folic acid, that's Folic acid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a synthetic form in supplements, okay, in fortified foods. Folate, which is natural, that's what I had mentioned in the beginning. This is that
Mm-hmm.
source from leafy greens, legumes, and can be found in animals that have converted, well, actually, not quite. That's because they actually have already converted it for us. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little. But folate is that in the natural form,
Mm-hmm.
comes from those dark leafy greens. And yes, it is naturally occurring, but it still requires the conversion to active
Mm-hmm.
forms in order for it to support DNA synthesis and repair that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is L-methylfolate or 5-MTHF, okay, which is the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the active form. This is what you can find in supplements, in some foods. This is biologically active. It
Mhm.
bypasses the MTHFR gene because it directly supports methylation. It
Mhm.
directly supports homocysteine metabolism and fetal development. So for
Mhm.
people who may have suboptimal MTHFRs, this could be, and I use that word very, highlighted, could be form for
Mhm.
you, but we will dive into reasons of why it may not in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then our next form would be folinic acid. That's Folinic. And this is also found in supplement form, but it is not the same. I will repeat that. It is not the same
Mhm.
as folic acid. And how I say this is it's actually an adenylated form of folate. So it is readily converted to the active folate in the body.
Mhm.
It's useful for those with impaired MTHFR function, which again, we're going to dive in more in detail a little bit later in this webinar. So I want to back up a little bit to folic acid,
Mhm.
because again, I am going to repeat that this is a synthetic form. You will not find this in nature outside of your body. Okay. It just doesn't exist. We have made it in a lab. Okay. And this form must be converted by MTHFR to active folate. It's less efficient. Um, and it's not very much of it actually gets converted and used by those with the MTHFR variants. So we'll kind of get into more of the folic acid and how that's not the greatest form to use,
Mhm.
but how our genes can help us determine which form of these folates that I had mentioned that would be most efficient for our bodies and most effective for our bodies. Did you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I think audience, just to kind of echo what Dr. Varden is saying, there are supplementally, if you're looking over the counter supplements, there's three forms of B9. We're really going to focus in on either the folinic, so the extra IN folinic, or the methylfolate. And the reason is they they are to an extent bioactive or forms that the body can use. And I'll just quickly speak to why we're not really going to be focusing on folic acid. Okay, so folic acid, again, a synthetic form that requires conversion before it really can be used in methylation. So, all these pathways that we talked about that are needed for DNA replication and neural tube development, etc. And there's a large portion of the population that really struggles with this conversion. So, taking this synthetic form and making it into an active B9 that the body can use. So, the question is, if you're taking in all this folic acid and it's not really going anywhere, in the sense of it's not going into the methylation pathway, is that accruement within the body, that collection within the body, does that do any damage? And the answer is to a certain extent, yes. And this is the general population. I'm not even just talking about the pregnant population at this point in time. Um, Apart from the fact that you're just not feeding enough B vitamins into the cycle, for some people, that accruing, that buildup of the folic acid isn't helpful within the body, and you can have some negative outcomes. So it tends to be a form we don't recommend because not everyone can convert it, and why risk that kind of buildup in your body if you can choose between two forms that the body understands, and we don't see any disadvantage if there's any a little bit of a buildup within. Okay, so we're solely going to be focusing on moving forward, deciding between folinic, that extra IN, folinic acid, and then methylfolate. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everyone. Dr. Varden, did I miss anything? Audience, toss in the chat if you want any more clarity around that. But moving forward, that's what you're going to hear us talking about. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I
All
think
right.
quite clear.
So, why don't we, audience? I want to start transitioning into. So, Dr. Varden's beautifully left all these spoiler alerts. We're going to talk to you about it's more than MTHFR. There's a lot to consider when you're picking your form of folate. So before we get to the very specific answers around that, Dr. Varden, do you want to talk through MTHFR and the presentations there? And do you want to talk through SHMT1 and the presentations there? And then audience, we're going to connect all the dots.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. So when you are looking at MTHFR gene, if you have gotten our test, okay, your DNA 360 test, you will find it in the anti-inflammation profile report. Okay. Now, when you open up that system summary report, you will see sub-reports. Okay. You want to go over to the methylation sub-report. And that's where you will see the genes in the methylation pathway. So MTHFR being one of the major genes in that pathway. And Dr. Kosterman has already mentioned about SHMT1, MTR. We are going to be touching on those and the importance in them in determination of what types or what forms of folate B9 and even B12 you could need or that would best suit you genetically. So there are two MTHFR genes that we look at. And this is very important because in other people's genetic reports, it could, variants could be presented differently. For example, in ours, you will see for the MTHFR, the first one, they have RSID numbers. These are very important because it helps to signify exactly which gene we're talking about. So the one I am mentioning is the one that ends in 1133. Okay. Sometimes you will see it as C as in Charlie, 677T as in Tom. Now, what that signifies, that it has that RSID, but what that C677T means is that it's actually called a nucleotide change. So it's saying, hey, you know, that C, which one of the four nucleotides, it's the cytosine. Cytosine is the wild type. It's the original normal, but what we call wild type nucleotide. And at position 677 on the gene, it actually got changed. It has a variant, a mutation. And instead of a cytosine, it is now thymine. Okay. When that nucleotide change happens, it can change the functionality of the gene. This is important to note because if you have that variant, that means that you can have less or lower enzymatic activity of MTHFR, which we've already, talked about saying, oh, well, MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, okay. And what it does is that it's responsible for that enzyme. It makes the enzyme that's involved in folate metabolism. Remember the B9 that we talked about, and the methylation process. So that's the first one. Then there's the other methylation gene. Now, this one is the RSID ends in 1131. Okay. And for this one, sometimes you will see, remember I talked about that nucleotide change. You will see A as in apple, 1298, C as in Charlie. So A being that normal wild type, C is the variant. That's the cytosine at position 1298 on the gene. Okay. So those two are what you're going to be seeing for your MTHFR in your reports. Now, when you look at ours, it will have either C, okay, the wild type, the normal type. You'll see either CC, or you'll see a CT, or you'll see a TT. So it depends on which one. If you have CC for the MTHFR that has the RSID of ending in 1133, that means you are optimal. Okay. If you see a CT, that means you have about a 30 to 40% reduced enzymatic activity. So it's not functioning, quite as optimally. If you have a TT, like I do, calling that out, that means you have like a 70 to 80% less enzymatic activity in that particular gene. So, and then for the MTHFR that ends in 1131, you'll either see A or AA, which is your normal wild type. You'll see an AC, which has a little bit less enzymatic activity, or a CC, which would be even more so. So that's what you're looking at. That's how you can tell the difference between the two. And there are differences in the two genes themselves. It's not just like, oh, hey, they're exactly the same and, doing all this. Not quite. I mean, yes, they are both very important in the methylation pathway. But when we're talking about the one that ends in 1133, okay, so you're either going to have a C or a T or some combination thereof. For that one, that's has strongly reduced activity if you are suboptimal, where the other one has more of a mild to moderate reduction. When we're talking about homocysteine levels, because those are often related in the methylation pathway, when you have suboptimal genes or a variant in the one ending in 1133, your homocysteine levels are often elevated, where in the other one, they are usually normal, or they can be normal. When we're talking about fertility and pregnancy, for the one ending in 1133, this is where you can get into possible miscarriages, although I don't want to reductionize it to just that one gene, because there's a lot of other things going on. Okay. But this is where it gets into what Dr. Kosterman was talking about on neural tube defects. The one ending in 1131, this gets into the methylation and more emotional resilience issues that it can start affecting. So there are some differences. And actually, if you want, I could even say, thinking about how this works, that if you can think of it like the one ending in 1133, you can think of it like a fuel filter that got clogged. So you don't get enough fuel. You're not getting enough clean fuel, okay, which can obviously make it a little bit harder to get pregnant or stay pregnant. Babies might not be able to grow as properly, especially, like she said, the spine and the brain, if there's not enough fuel for that. Where the one ending in 1131, this usually is, it's less serious slowdown, but it can make that bad chemical buildup. It can make a mess with mood and stress and hormone balance, especially when you also have problems or a variant with the other one. So you want to make sure that that electrical system, that your body is not glitchy, that you have all the fuel that you need, and having everything to grow a very healthy baby.
Yeah. Audience, before Dr. Varden continues on to SHMT1, which is the next gene we want to examine, and Joanna, for your and anyone else who has the DNA 360, you want to look in the anti-inflammatory, inflammatory section. There'll be a sub-report that's very specific to methylation, which will list out everything that we've talked about. But audience, especially those that are trying to get pregnant, I want to be very, very clear and specific. If you have a suboptimal MTHFR for one SNP, the other, or both, okay, it has been studied that assuming you have sufficient folate within your diet, so sufficient B9 within your diet, and a good diet, okay, this suboptimal presentation of MTHFR does not mean you cannot get pregnant, does not mean you cannot carry a pregnancy, or that it's going to be detrimental to your child. When we look at people who are properly nutriated, is not a word, but it should be properly nourished. That's the word. We got their audience. Assuming proper nutrition, having a suboptimal MTHFR is not something that will prevent or create problem within pregnancy or child. I want to be very, very clear and specific about that. Okay, because I think people who are trying to get pregnant and people who carry children, they tend to also carry a lot of guilt and fear. And we want to make sure that our chat today is not doing that. We want to empower you with information so you can make best choice and then leave the balance up to the forces that are life. Okay. So Dr. Varden, do you want to talk through SHMT1 and then audience, we're going to stitch all the stars together and make a beautiful little tapestry.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, you will find the methylation pathway genes that we're talking about in your anti-inflammatory profile report in your DNA 360. Okay, so SHMT1 kind of sounds like shit something.
Which is so funny because audience, we don't have to tell you what everyone calls the MTHFR gene. We all know how that is referred to colloquially. So it's funny that we have that and then that. It's just a whole bunch of swear words.
Yes. So what is the SHMT1? Well, it stands for serine hydroxymethyltransferase 1. Yeah, big word again, a lot in the mouth
Way
coming
too
out.
many syllables.
But here's what it means in simple terms. So SHMT1 is a gene that helps your body use certain B vitamins like B9, folate, to build important things like we had mentioned already. DNA helps with DNA synthesis. So remember, DNA is like that instruction manual for all the cells in your body and for a growing baby. So what does it do exactly? So I want you to imagine your body like a factory. Okay. SHMT1 is one of the machines on the assembly line to do that. And it helps turn serine, which is an amino acid, into methylfolate, the active form of folate. Methylfolate, remember, builds new cells, makes neurotransmitters, those brain chemicals, supports detox, immune health, all these wonderful things. Now, when we're talking about variants, this is where in the reports, if you have a G as in George version, that is the normal wild type optimal, okay? So it just means that your body is good at making methylfolate, okay? If you have the letter A as an apple in there, for example, if you have an AG or an AA, let's go to AG first. It means that your body is okay, but it's not perfect. Well, you're perfect in your imperfection. So, but let's shift from there and just talk about the G. So if you have an AA version, this is suboptimal. And that means that the SHMT1 machine is a little rusty and works a little slower. So how is this important for pregnancy? Well, during pregnancy, remember we said that your body makes a lot of new cells for both you and the baby, that little parasite, that little beautiful thing that is taking up all of those nutrients as well as some toxins that are in your body as well. And, is just absorbing all the love. But when we're talking about methylation, this means that your body needs more methylfolate, better for DNA building, stronger cell division, stronger growth. And if this gene is not working well, your body might not be making enough methylfolate. So, going to reiterate, this increases the risk of neural tube defects, but it does not mean that the baby will have it, like Dr. Kosterman so gently and strongly mentioned. This is why the knowledge of your pathways, of your genes are so important. So you have that knowledge, that agency to do something about it. Another thing that it can affect, again, I don't want to reductionize, but it can affect the ability for getting and staying pregnant. It can also affect fatigue or poor detoxification for mama, okay? But there are things that you can do. So depending on the form, the genetic presentation that you have, if you're optimal, your body can handle the methylated form, methylfolate. if you are suboptimal, so if you have an A variant in there, then your body actually would do better with folinic acid. Remember, having that extra IN in there, that is the form that your body best utilizes. Oh, well, we have
Sounds like we have a visitor.
speaking of a little
Oh,
friend, yes, we have
bonjour, petit
we have
Medel.
someone who decided to come say hi. So this is one of my beautiful little grandbabies that I'm going to pass back over to Dada.
Oh, she's so happy that grandma's home.
So
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, please.
Now, I was just going to say that if you have, remember for the SHMT1, if you have an A allele, whether it's a G or an AA, you would be better off in taking folinic acid, that
Yeah.
form of folate, rather than methylfolate.
Yeah. So, audience, let's have some real talks here. Because when it comes to studying pregnancy, science is scared, and reasonably so. We don't want to do anything to hurt mama or baby, right? So, are there very specific studies that say if this gene, then this form of folate, Napita's back in action? Um, no, right? It has been studied that assuming sufficiency of a B9, right? So either your folinic or your methylfolate, you're going to carry a better pregnancy, carry better conception than without. Now, this said, and this sits within clinical trends over the past 10 years, give or take. So, audience, for kind of science historical awareness, methylfolate became really sexy within the supplement and medical industry about 10 years ago, give or take maybe 15. Um, and in parallel to that, what people who practiced within the fertility space started noticing is that they would put their clients on a prenatal that had a methylfolate because, hey, it's the active form, it's the sexy form. It bypasses all of this, it's going to help with everything. And they would find these people would come back a few weeks later, sometimes a month later, and say, like, hey, since I started the prenatal, I actually kind of feel cloggy a little bit. I feel a little bit more tired. They would say, there's nothing wrong. I just feel a little bit different and not in a positive way. And where we've kind of developed as we've further understood methylation pathways, what this is likely attributable to is that not everyone responds well to methylfolate. Some bodies don't receive it well. And SHMT1 is definitely one of the SNPs, the genes, that is going to be curating that experience, whether it's received well. So when we talk about what form of folate to be picking, is there formal study? No, because science is kind of scared of pregnancy. I say that in jest. Um, that said, there's a lot of clinical evidence. There's a lot of clinical anecdote as well that says really speaks to methylated B9 is not for everyone. SHMT1 is one of the factors that would be contributing to that. So if you know your SHMT1 and you're suboptimal, so you have a G allele an A allele, an apple allele hanging out in there, you may want to be the person that is opting for folinic acid instead of methylfolate. And remember, within that dose range, okay, I think it's really important. Sometimes we see people during the preconception phases and then the pregnancy overdoing it a little bit on supplements. Remember that from a daily perspective, if you're not pregnant or not looking to conceive, you're usually looking at about 400 micrograms. When you're looking to conceive and pregnant, that goes up between 600 to 1,000, depending on who you're talking to. So we're not talking about mega doses. And I say this, audience, check all the supplements you're on. If you're on a prenatal, you're probably getting more than enough and you don't need to be getting this through another form, which happens a lot. People have really good intentions and they'll take all the supplements and it's actually not helpful to pregnancy. You want to be within that safety window. Okay. Dr. Varden, any other thoughts there? Any other helpful ideas as to people who are on this webinar trying to decide between prenatals and what form of folate?
Yeah, it supports other methylation
Beautiful.
supports.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Like B6, we've already mentioned
Mm-hmm.
B12, okay? Choline, magnesium, even riboflavin, B12, B2, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, when we're talking about, these individual genes, these individual vitamins, guys, they don't exist in a vacuum. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
we highlight them and talk about them, just like when there is a sports team. Okay. Well, you love basketball, Dr.
Go
Kosterman.
sports.
So when you have a team playing, well, yeah, you go to watch the team beat another team. And then during the game, they will take one player from the team and give highlights. They will give their stats. They will talk about strengths, weaknesses, how they've been doing the past season, what's been going on with them individually. But that individual doesn't play the game all by
Mm-hmm.
himself or herself. They play on a team. So we take one out, talk about them, put them
Mm-hmm.
back, and then they play together.
Mm-hmm.
So strengths or weaknesses that one player has, the others can make up for.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same type of thing for pathways. It's like this
Mm-hmm.
is one gene, just like MTHFR. Yes, it can affect, the overall team, but it's not
Yeah.
the only player on that team. So just like SHMT1, just like MTHFR, there are other players, but there are other ways to help support these
Mm-hmm.
vitamins, these players. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that we want to make sure that we are providing the body with the other nutrients, with the other
Mm-hmm.
cofactors. Okay. And things like B6, all
Mm-hmm.
right, helps with that. This helps
Mm-hmm.
to convert homocysteine into something useful.
Yeah.
It's needed for those neurotransmitters. It helps supporting that conversion of serine that we talked about to glycine, which is directly tied to SHMT1's job. Okay. B12, which we've mentioned earlier. So that helps with DNA synthesis. All right. It helps to move methyl groups where they're needed, works very, very closely with folate, and
Mm-hmm.
also helping with red blood cell formation. Okay, to help recycle homocysteine into methionine, which is another building block. So choline is really important. Okay, choline, because that really helps with the brain. Okay, it really helps with the spinal cord development. So foods found in eggs, liver, some plant foods. Okay, it acts
Mm-hmm.
as a backup methyl donor.
Mm-hmm.
So, it helps to give your body extra methyl groups if folate or SHMT1 is struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Magnesium. Magnesium is amazing. This mineral, it works like a spark plug. Okay. Important in over 300
Yeah.
enzymes and enzymatic reactions in the body, including those in the methylation cycle. It helps to activate the B vitamins like
Mm-hmm.
B6, B12. Okay. Very important for pregnancy. Help support relaxation. And don't we know that our pregnant ladies need a little relaxation? Help with the
Mm-hmm.
blood pressure, muscle function. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
never underestimate these other nutrients. Oh,
Yeah.
riboflavin. I mentioned riboflavin,
Mm-hmm.
which is B2. That is needed to activate MTHFR enzyme, which turns folate into its usable form.
Yeah.
So it helps mitochondria, the energy producers, helps them to work better. So,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that can help support the overall team that is the methylation pathway.
Yeah. Yeah. Audience, I think the message that Dr. Varden and I both want to impart to you as you're thinking through your genes and your supplementation is it's not just about one actor. It's really tempting to think it's just about MTHFR. It's tempting to think it's just about folate, but there's many different genes that contribute to that team, how they play basketball. Just like there are many different nutrients that are not only going to contribute to the game, but then also contribute to the music and all the other fun things that go on when you're playing that game. And I think before we transition into questions, because I see a happy amount, Audience, just remember that this is the beginning of your journey, right? Conception, pregnancy are just the beginning. And the mamas out there, you want to make sure that you're nourishing your body, not only for my sister is happily pregnant right now. And some days she calls it a parasite, and then other days she calls it her baby, depends on how she woke up. So be it your baby or your parasite. It's not only to offer them nutrition, but it's also to offer you nutrition in the present moment, but separately when you have given birth and body's trying to readjust, having more nutrition will soothe some of that transition period as you're trying to rid hormones and be a mom and not sleep and all the other fun things. So nourish for baby, but also make sure you're nourishing for yourself so you can be the mom you want to be once baby's here. Decor. All right. I think we're jumping into questions and answers, right, Dr. Barden?
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right. Um, so Cynthia is asking, did adding folic acid, so folic, this is without the IN, this is the synthetic form. Did adding folic acid to food increase the number of people born with suboptimal SNPs or suboptimal genetic presentations? Um, Dr. Varden, let me know if you know differently, but Cynthia, the really difficult part about that question um, is just the how we track data over time. So we learned about synthetic folate and some of the consequences within the body when the U.S. government mandated that it be infused within food, and that was for good. Like that was kindly meant. They knew how important it was. They're like, hey, let's put it into food, and maybe that's going to help outcomes, right? And then we learned not so much, and so we took it. We by and large kind of took it out, or at least reduced the requirements on it. In parallel to that is when we've kind of started tracking more and more genes. So it's difficult to kind of mix those two bodies up. Is there genetic shifts that are happening? Probably. But that's going to be something you see over generations, not necessarily over kind of one generation that period of time when we had folic acid and everything happened. Dr. Varden, anything else that you want to add to
Well,
that?
it's really a shame because way back when they were doing the research on adding folic acid fortifying our foods,
Oh.
they did the studies on mice.
Mm,
The mice, the way
yeah.
that their DHFR gene works is different than humans.
Mm-hmm.
And when they added folic acid and things were fine, well, great, but that's part of the problem in translational science. When you're talking animal models to humans, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
translate as well.
Yeah,
So
and Megan is asking the question, what are the specific consequences of kind of that accumulation of folic acid? And so, Megan, again, these aren't specific necessarily to pregnant people, but on kind of a more superficial level, it can mask some B12 deficiency, which is another vitamin we know is important for methylation. Um, in some people, some studies say it actually impacts the amount of natural killer cells, which is a white blood cell that responds to um, infectious agents and is part of the immune surveillance. Okay. In some people, there was an increased risk of colon, prostate, and probably breast. Don't hold me to breast. I think breast, but definitely colorectal and prostate cancer, maybe breast cancer. There was an increased risk there. And then it also contributed to a few neurologic behavioral experiences, so increased irritability, sleep disturbances, cognitive fogs, things like that. So that was what was reported. And again, that's the people that aren't able to take that synthetic form and convert it into more of a usable form. So Megan, I hope that cleared things up. All right.
I
Susan's,
see it.
oh,
Yeah, Susan. Well, I was reading it over. And so she's asking for everybody's awareness. She's saying
yeah.
if someone is homozygous for C677T, which is one of the MTHFR genes, and her 1298, which is the other MTHFR gene, is fine,
Mm-hmm.
is she says MTHF, which is the methylated form of folate, or folinic acid, a better choice. And here's where I say, I don't have enough information. I need to know what your
Mm-hmm.
SHMT1 gene is. So if you can pop that either in the chat, actually do it in the chat if you don't mind, Susan, then I can tell you which one would actually be better.
Yeah.
So see if you can find your SHMT1 gene genetic presentation, what letters?
Yeah. All right. Ms. Moore is asking a question. Is it okay if my probiotic is methyl free? So Ms. Moore, I'm going to imagine by probiotic you mean prenatal, because probiotics are really a collection of bacteria, um, trying to support the gut, and typically do not contain B vitamins or methyl Bs. And so really the question is if your prenatal is methyl free, is that okay? And I think this will be similar to what we're talking about with Susan, right? It really comes down to what are your genes that will inform that answer. But again, I want to be very, very clear. While I think you can optimize and pick a best form based on your genes, studies do show that assuming you have sufficient B9, you will not have kind of the deleterious effects that we've been talking about. So I hope that was helpful. And I wonder if Susan may have dropped off. I know there are a few people that were catching this webinar in between things. But Dr. Varden, why don't you talk through, again, just giving the audience quickly with
Mhm.
SHMT1, which versions would have you pointed more towards a methylfolate compared to a folinic acid?
Okay, so if you're SHMT1, if your presentation is GG, if you have double G's, you can take the methylfolate, that MTHF or 5-MTHF, and be just fine. If you have an A in there, meaning GA or AA, you really should be taking folinic acid. There we go.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. So Elaine, Elena. I hope I'm saying that right. Girl, I'm sorry. When
Lane.
I it's a long day and I really need new glasses. It's been on my to-do list for a really long time.
Get some Viva rays.
I can see better without my glasses than with them, which is very concerning. All right. When I use folate, they're not sure the form. They develop phlebitis, which is superficial blood clots. Is this something that is related to a gene variant? Um, okay. So phlebitis, yeah, so agitation of blood veins there. I have not directly heard that. I'd be really curious the form what you're taking. I'd be very curious exactly what you are taking in some other conditions. Typically, we wouldn't expect a B vitamin to be doing that within a body. I would suspect there's something else going on. And I would really hope, based on that presentation of clots, that you're working with a provider. Unfortunately, Elaine, we don't really have the information that we can guide this. There is not going to be a gene, sorry, that is directly contributing to this, or at least not the variants that we look at. If you're looking for some support, though, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to do some consult there, but we need a lot more detail before we're able to offer any insight there.
Would you mind if I just mentioned something? Because I actually brought
Please.
this up, oh, I don't remember, a few webinars ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I had done some research in this because I
Oh,
myself
please.
had dealt with lower limb thrombosis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the presence of an MTHFR variant in and of itself alone, remember taking that single player out of the team, does not directly cause blood clots.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some large studies and in clinical guidelines, even though they don't consider the polymorphisms themselves to be significant risk factors for thrombosis. All right, so I do want to mention that, that there have been some associations where MTHFR mutations leading to elevated
Mm-hmm.
homocysteine levels, okay,
Mm-hmm.
which is recognized as a risk factor
Mm-hmm.
for venous thromboembolisms, including deep vein thrombosis and less common superficial
Mm-hmm.
phlebitis. So you're absolutely correct that we don't have a lot of
Yeah.
information. The research, there's not
Cool.
that direct, but
Yeah.
there's the associations, especially when we're talking about homocysteine levels, because that also is an indicator of systemic inflammation.
I
So,
value you. Thank you for
and
bringing that up.
you're welcome. And the fact that, that association is present in myself, who is homozygous suboptimal in
Mm-hmm.
my MTHFR, the one that
Mm-hmm.
does raise homocysteine levels, and that I did have lower limb thrombosis when I was pregnant, both times when my estrogen levels and
Mm-hmm.
everything else were higher. So again, single player, not the main
Mm-hmm.
thing, but can be contributory.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Um, Elaine's also asking another question. Can this gene mutation in men also cause fertility issues? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Men are 50% of this equation. And methylation, arguably to them, especially in regards to that DNA creation, given they don't do it, as when they're within their mom, instead they do it every single day through spermatogenesis. Way too many syllables.
Spermatogenesis. Yeah.
Way too many syllables. I appreciate you. And so when we think about sperm quality, when we think about sperm quality in terms of DNA, but also the motility and the ability of the sperm to swim and to penetrate and to do the things that it needs to support conception from a natural perspective, meaning no laboratory intervention. Again, you'd want to the end to be properly supported, right? Having suboptimal variants and then not the supports to kind of compensate tends to be where those issues are. And remember that just like in women, in men, methylation touches on so much more than just simply the DNA and how that sperm cell is going to be created. It is also touching on hormones. It is touching on detoxification. It is touching on neurotransmitters. It touches on everything in the body. So even if we were to, say, let's step outside of gonads where we're where we're making all this sperm, and we simply think about the hormones that are going to encourage libido and are going to encourage healthy sperm, right? Methylation impacts all of that. So the answer is yes. But it can be all supported properly if you know your genes and you're supplementing and eating properly. Yeah. Anything else? Any other colors to add there, Dr. Varden?
No, I think
Oh,
you covered that beautifully. Actually, I was looking at a couple of these other questions.
nice. What's up
There's
next?
Tracy Bennett actually is asking, can you explain what is needed if the gene is missing? And then down below, she
Yeah.
said, what is needed if SHMT1 gene
Yeah.
specifically is missing? Now, here's where I want to let you all know that in these genes, the complete absence or deletion of these genes in humans is not reported in any scientific literature. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You
The,
have them.
the complete absence, of SHMT1 gene, again, specifically not reported in humans. So you all have it. It's just whether it is optimal or suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where that comes in, because you're inheriting two copies, one from mom, one from dad. It's just how well that enzyme is working.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we've talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful answer. I like that. Um, do you have specific supplement recommendations for folinic acid? And so I think just echoing a little bit of what Dr. Varden has said, when you're picking your prenatal, making sure it covers a number of bases. So that full, beautiful spectrum complement of B vitamins, some other fat based vitamins. So thinking vitamin A, thinking vitamin E, D, right? As well as some of the minerals. So I would offer. Talk to your provider. Feel free to reach out to us and talk to us. But I think there's some really good prenatals out there. You'd want to pick the form of B9 accordingly, as well as B12 accordingly. And then just confirm with your provider, do I need anything additional? Should there be something that is not covered by this multivitamin, right? By this prenatal? Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Emily, I'm not trying to give you a non-answer. I would say by and large, prenatals are formulated pretty well. It's more in the details of if you have something from a health perspective that says, hey, you should actually be having more choline than whatever is given in the supplement, or hey, maybe you should be having less of this. You don't really need the iron, so let's not do that. Or maybe you need more iron, whatever. Usually it's more, but that sort of thing that kind of comes when you consult with a doctor. So feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for that sort of supplement advice. All right, Dr. Varden, Kirsten or Kristen, I can't see that far.
Kristen.
All right, so she says hello, hello. My methylation results were optimal except for SHMT1, so she's an AG, and they now understand that they should be taking Folinic with the IN acid. Um, they've been taking a prenatal with methylfolate for several years, and they've not been able to get pregnant. Is it possible that changing to folinic acid could make a significant difference in conception? Um, uh, okay. And they're saying that the form or the prenatal that they're on is a quality, so it's thankfully not a quality issue. Um, the answer is yes and no. And Dr. Varden, actually, did you kind of want to plug our fertility summit that we did a little bit? And then I think
Absolutely.
we'll also speak to this because I think the answer is multifactorial. Is it going to help you? Absolutely. Is it the only thing? Absolutely not.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we actually dove into a lot of fertility issues, what you can do about it. We did a 3-day summit, our She Summit, on the fertility blueprint. We did this
Yeah.
back in May, and our replays are available for purchase. Um, Actually, it's available for DNA University students in our DNA University platform. But if you're not a
Yeah.
student, if you're not a preferred provider, you can actually purchase the replays. And our wonderful behind the scenes people, Katie, Vanny, will put that information in the link in the chat.
Hmm.
Also, we have done and written several wonderful articles on
Hmm.
fertility. That was focused, I believe it was in issue 4 of our DNA Talks Digest that came out in April, which also has the article that I wrote on how to understand or understanding genetic notation that I was explaining that you guys probably had eyes glazed over going, I still don't know what the hell she's talking about. That it written form lays
Yeah.
it out on how to read that. So that article can be found in issue 4 that came out in April of our DNA Talks Digest, which we will link in the chat. And it's also available if you go onto our website at the DNAcompany.com.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our app. Check out our app. It's all in there. The DNA Way. You can always sign up for our
Hmm.
webinars. You can watch past webinars. You can listen to our podcast, and you can read our digest right from that app. So it's a great resource, everything all in one. So wanted to
Hmm.
plug.
Yeah, yeah. So Kirsten kind of added in, she actually went to the summit and it was great.
Fantastic.
And yes, of course, there's other factors, but just wondering if that could be significant. And um, possibly is the answer. I think there's an element of personalization that's difficult just to simply call in genes. So I'll offer myself as an example. I'm very sensitive to methyl vitamins, and in the instance where I accidentally take one, right? I'm a naturopath that goes to a lot of conferences, and they tend to throw supplements at us, and I'm not always discerning, and I tend to go like this. But when I accidentally take a methyl, I feel it right away. I feel that impact right away. And so for me, I could speculate that would be a big barrier because I know what my body is like with and without it. Is that the same for you? Is this the sole barrier? You'll find out. And I think I'm grateful that you're going to be shifting. It'll be interesting if you let us know in a few months if it was a big shift and a big barrier because methylation is so important to everything that is going on hormonally, neurologically, mood wise, all the fun things. And so shifting that, supporting that sometimes can just clean up and have beautiful emergent impacts. Yeah. So I hope for you, Kirsten, that is the thing, but it's very difficult to know. Right.
And I am going to do another shameless plug. for our Black label supplements. Honestly, I've looked in many places to see about combinations of B vitamins and different other
Yeah.
compounds that help support the methylation pathway, like inositol or
Yeah.
trimethylglycine, things like that, finding it in one, but also providing the different combinations based on your genetics,
Mm-hmm.
having folinic acid or adenosylcobalamin or, one of these, they're just not out there.
Mm-hmm.
But our
Mm-hmm.
finished Black label, even
Mm-hmm.
our Black label personalized supplement blend,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually get best of both worlds. You can get all of those wonderful B vitamins and other compounds that help support the methylation pathway, and specifically choose the types of folate and cobalamin that your genes dictate. Our finished Black label methylation optimizer does not have the B9 or the B12, specifically because your genes may not, will
Mm-hmm.
dictate the form. So we keep those out so you can get those separately. So, hey, it works. And they're excellent
Yeah.
uh, compounds that we use, really researched very well by
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kosterman and team. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I think we're all very passionate about that one because audience, we'll put one more webinar link up if you're really curious about methylation and really um, nerds kind of going at the fuller pathway. We have done webinars where we very specifically dive into the full methylation pathway. And one thing that you'll come to learn is based on kind of the sexy MTHFR gene and the sexiness of methylfolate as an additive, it's in absolutely everything. And so to Dr. Barton's point, it's really difficult to come by a formula that doesn't have that in there. And so we'll make sure we're very mindful in particular of the prenatals, where you can get one without that. Yeah. All right.
oh, I see Susan in the chat. She said
Mm,
that her DNA report was from another company and they didn't list the SHMT1 in the report, but they did
mm,
list SHMT2 as
yeah.
AG, and was asking if the
Mhm.
that version uh, to be used for the determination on what type of
Mhm.
folate. So do you have insight on that?
I do not. I would need to know, Susan, the RSID, but to my awareness, that's not going to be impacting the form of folate. It's very specific to um, an RSID, a SNP that we look at in SHMT1. So my answer would be probably not, but I would also need the SNP number there. Sorry to be so exacting, but um, I wouldn't want to generalize and give you bad advice on a gene. Yeah, sorry about that. Um, yeah, but thank you for doing the diligence there. I wish I was able to be a little bit more helpful there. Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
the RSID is. Oh, there we go. Okay, give me just 1 second. I'll quickly. Um. Oops. All right.
I do know that
Yeah.
SHMT2 has to deal with mitochondrial support, where the other one is
Yeah.
cytosolic.
I'm not seeing anything come up on Snippedia, so I'm not able to offer. I don't know if I have the wrong RSID. Um, I can't find it. Let's see. Mm, yeah, it's not coming up here for me under that RSID. Sorry, Susan.
I
Um,
I did find, well, something of not finding something. From what I can cursorily find,
mhm,
that current research and clinical guidance don't link the SHMT2 with that RSID status to specific recommendations for folate
yeah,
supplementation,
yeah,
like we have for the SHMT1. So,
yeah. It's a different
because
enzyme.
yeah, well, it's a mitochondrial isoform uh,
Hmm.
that works that, where
Hmm.
SHMT1 is the cytosolic
Hmm.
form that
Yeah.
guides the folate form.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right.
All right. Well, Dr. Varden, it was absolutely delightful. And I think the beautiful part of that is we got a grandbaby. I was hoping yesterday that we would see a grandbaby, and here they are. I love it.
She
Yeah.
just loves her Nana. Like I said, she'll just like push the door open. Nana.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
my babies are my hearts. I love them.
Yeah.
They are my why for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, audience, we hope that if your why is conception or supportive pregnancy, be it for yourself or someone that you love, we hope that this webinar this evening was able to walk you through genes, walk you through folate, and hopefully better inform the supplementation that you're taking, as well as just remind you that you're doing absolutely spectacular. And one little tiny thing is one little straw is not going to break the camel's back. Making sure you have enough folate is arguably more important than the form. So just keep that in mind, audience. But know your genes because that will really ease and support that whole process, your body, and the ups and downs that pregnancy can be and conception can be. Yeah. So,
Lean
audience.
into your foods.
Yeah, yeah. Audience, if this was helpful, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or via any of our surveys. We show up to the end of supporting you. So if you want to hear more on this topic, less on this topic, or different on this topic, as well as what we're doing well, what you want us to see us continue doing, the positive feedback is also helpful because it helps us keep what you like in there. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. But until next time, I think Dr. Varden, Medell, thank you. And I think it's time that we dance out.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. Such a pleasure.
Yeah. Au revoir, mes amis. Au revoir. There. Yes, Vanny. Got the music early. Love it.